Today, I'm joined by Patrick Engasser. Patrick is a best-selling author, business coach, and motivational speaker who has built a career helping people break through obstacles and perform at a higher level. He started out as a top sales rep for a Fortune 500 company, quickly rising to become a district manager and leading a seven-figure sales team. Along the way, he earned multiple awards for management excellence and became known for developing high-performing sales professionals. What made what makes Patrick's story even more powerful is that he's been blind since birth. He spent his life overcoming challenges that would stop most people, and now he teaches others how to do the same. Today, he works with executives, entrepreneurs, and sales leaders, helping them push past limitations to achieve more. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn from his unique experience. So, Patrick, welcome to the show.
John, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
It's an honor to have you on the show, and I'm really interested in talking to you. And I've got a lot to learn. But let's dive into it real quick. I mean, I mentioned in the introduction you've been blind since birth, but yet you've had this remarkable career in sales, leadership, and coaching. Early on, what did you have to believe about yourself that maybe others didn't believe in you yet?
Yeah, it's a great question because early on in my career in sales, I probably didn't believe my blindness was an asset. I really probably believed it was a liability rather than something that I could leverage to get to, to kind of build relationships with people, that my story was something that people would want to get to know and that would make an impact on people. So that was something that I had to flip that narrative on its head and really change that paradigm in my own mind first. It's one of the things I work with people. You mentioned me being a coach. I work with people in coaching, whether in leadership positions or sales or entrepreneurs. Usually they think we're going to start with strategy, but like me, a lot of times it's a mindset shift that needs to happen first because that's usually where success or setbacks happen is in the mind first. So for me, once I realized that I could see my blindness as an asset, not as a liability, that's when everything started to change for me. A lot of that happened when I hired a business coach at the end of my second year in business and in sales. So I was in a kind of a unique position, and then I was in the insurance industry. I was in kind of a 1099 self-employed position representing a Fortune 500 company in the supplemental insurance space. And it was kind of a outside sales position, but you were also essentially running your own business. So I had no business experience, no sales experience, and you can probably guess how the first year went. So I appreciate all your kind intro, but I definitely didn't start as a top performer. I became a top performer once I grew into kind of having that better mindset. So I think that once I realized that, hey, I have a story, and when I walk into an appointment, the business owner typically wants to know more about me and more about my dog and how I got there to the meeting rather than what I'm selling, which was really great because it was an opportunity for me to build rapport. It just took me slowing down and really realizing that the ultimate goal was doing something I've always been pretty good at. And now I feel like it's one of my greatest strengths, and that's building relationships. Whether I've been in a leadership role or in sales or as a coach, that's what I really thrive at. And so once I realized I could use that to benefit not only me, but the person across the table from me, because they were curious about my story, because they were interested in talking to me about my guide dog, that was an opportunity for me to build rapport and build a relationship quickly. And then we could get to how I could help them, what their pain points were, and how I could make an impact.
One of the things that when you talk about that, the first thing I think of is, most people would see, your situation as a liability, right? And you probably did at some point in your life that said this is liability, but you found that it was an asset. You found it was a strength, and you found just the way you discuss it is like you were able to turn that into a powerful strength, an advantage, say over other people who were trying to sell as well. So that's really inspiration when you hear that, because I think a lot of people say, woe is me, I'm new to the job, or I don't have the experience, or there's other people that are selling more than me. But you're saying, hey, what do you have at your fingertips that could be an asset for you in the role that you have, right?
Absolutely. A lot of times, if you look at what your greatest challenge is, your greatest obstacle, if you're willing to own that and find a way that you can use that as an asset or that you can lean into some part of it. I understand that's not always going to be the case. And sometimes it's going to be hard to find, but usually buried somewhere in there, hidden in, I would say, hidden in what you're trying to hide is often your greatest asset or your greatest tool, right? You're probably thinking, I don't want people to know this about me, or this is something I'm trying to cover up. But sometimes that's your greatest asset. And are you willing to lean into it or not? There's no doubt about it that when I come in to speak, and I'm not, embarrassed to admit this, it's just part of what I do. When someone in a leadership role brings me in to speak to their team or brings me in to speak to their leadership team in their organization, one of the biggest reasons they do it is because they feel like if I bring this guy in, he can. What excuses do they have after this? So it almost doesn't. I had someone say to me, they're like, it almost doesn't matter what you say, and you did a great job, and my team is super motivated, but you could have walked in and said almost anything, and everyone would be like, what excuse do I have when this guy walks out of here to not get the job done, or stop complaining, or succeed at a higher level? So whether I'm coaching teams or I'm just brought in for a one-off talk to leadership groups, that's usually a big part of it. And that's why my talk usually revolves around eliminating excuses and overcoming challenges, because let's face it, we all face challenges every day in life. That's part of life, and we all have excuses in our mind. We don't often like to refer to them as that, but that's when we boil it down. A lot of what we deal with is our own excuses. I have them, you have them, we all have them, and it's how do we get rid of them, eliminate them, or at the very least, do our best to move them out of the way as an obstacle that we've created, so that we can get to the opportunity that's behind them. So that's a big part of the message. And I know the fact that I walk in with a mobility cane or a guide dog and stand in front of the room and tell my story, that's one of the biggest things that resonates with people. So you're absolutely right.
I love that. I love that. So, you were in sales for a long time, and then you made the switch to, as you were mentioning, you now do a lot of coaching, motivational speaking.
Mm-hmm.
When did you realize that you wanted to make that switch? What was the kind of the aha moment, or what, take us back to that time you made that switch?
Yeah, so I was in a district manager role for 10 years, as you mentioned. A big part of it was a few years ago, my wife and I decided we were going to move at some point, from New York to Florida. And I had a business that I'd already started in business coaching and speaking. But I had to decide, was I going to actually take this and take it to the next level and turn it into a full-time business? Or was this going to be something I did by referral when people came to me? Because I had a few people come to me, uh, within the sales world, say, "Hey, would you coach me?" I don't know. I've never thought about it, but they're asking me, if I paid you, would you coach me? Because, I've seen what you do, what you've done within your insurance world, and I don't know anything about sales. I just got into it, or I just stepped into a leadership role. Would you help me out? And sure. So I don't really know what that would look like, but that's kind of how my business coaching and sales coaching and leadership coaching started. And I'd have people come in and ask me to speak, and at first I wasn't even charging for that, because I enjoyed giving back. But at some point I realized that I was going to have to build a business, and that meant treating my business like a business. And if we wanted to move at some point, I was either going to have to go build another sales team in a different place, a much smaller market that we wanted to move to. We now live in Destin, Florida. Um, or I was going to have to do something else. And I love the coaching aspect of the sales world, and in general, just working with entrepreneurs, who are in a leadership role or a sales role, or they're the owner operator, helping them to build a life of more freedom, to be able to really build a business that they can work more on instead of in all the time, was something I really enjoyed in the insurance world. And so I started to do it outside of that world, and that was kind of the aha moment for me. It was like, this is what gives me juice every morning,
Mm.
what helps me to wake up with a smile. And now I just get to do it after a walk on the beach. So for me, that's even better. But I would say a couple of stories. I had a couple of people who they did the work, but I feel like I was able, because of what they told me, was able to really make an impact on their business in the insurance world, and help them turn things around. and you get a handful of success stories and testimonials that have your name in it. There's nothing, for me, there's nothing better than that. So that was my favorite part. And I'm like, if I could turn this into a business where I'm able to do this all the time without all the, management politics and stuff that always comes along sometimes with the management, that would be great. And I could then work with leaders, help leaders get to the next level, but do that as a business owner. So I love it.
Oh, that's really cool. I think of, just your story is very interesting because, I think a lot of times we have different aspects of our job we love, right?
Yep.
And then and there's some that we probably don't like, but it's really unique because I think in my case a similar, like I enjoy manufacturing, but I've been in it for 30 years, and I
Yep.
started doing teaching on the side. And I actually fell in love with it, and like my passion became more teaching college age students, and so
Sure.
I'm feeling myself pulled more towards the education piece and less to my manufacturing business because it brings me a lot of joy, and so I sounds like you had a similar moment as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point that you bring up because there's always something that I feel like when you believe you're making an impact and you can tell you're making an impact, at
Mm,
some point it becomes more about the impact you're making and about others and being other focused as opposed to just all being about you, right?
mm,
We're human beings, so we're always self-centered to some extent. But when you really, I feel like, grow to the next level and start to feel like you're making a difference, and you have a purpose that's bigger than yourself, that's when it really, um, I don't know. I just, for me, that's what really feeds me, and it sounds like that's exactly what feeds you as well. I'm sure you can relate to that being in the military as well. Which, thank you for your service. I definitely appreciate that, and really all that goes into serving in the military. But a lot of that, you probably felt like this, the mission and the brotherhood and leading others in that, in that regard, was something that was really impactful. And now you feel the same way teaching students. And when somebody is really thirsty for the knowledge that you have that you can share with them, and it's making a difference, and you can tell and they're telling you and you can just feel it, that really motivates and drives me, and I'm sure you and most people out there can relate to that,
yeah.
rather than people are there because it's a job and they feel like they have to be, and you find your diamonds in the rough and your gems who are like, hey, give me all you can, pour into me, tell me more, and they're asking you questions. It's a treat to coach and lead and teach those people. But everybody isn't that way. When there's students, I'd like to think that not always, but more often than not, you can kind of see that direct impact. As coaching members, when I work with coaching members and they're investing in their business and hiring a coach, me as a coach, um, they got skin in the game. So there aren't any more. There aren't any more. There aren't any more people sitting on the sidelines at that point. Like, yeah, maybe this job will work out, maybe it won't. Everybody's in it to win it because they've invested in coaching, and that to me is really exciting. That I have somebody who wants to win and wants to get better and grow, and that's something I say and share with them is actually could make a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say, that makes you uniquely qualified, or makes your coaching with sales professionals and entrepreneurs sort of special and different?
I think I'm really good at. Thanks. That's a great question. I think I'm really good at problem solving in unique situations. And every business owner, entrepreneur, sales professional, business leader who comes to me, of course, thinks their situation's the most unique. I probably felt the same way when I started working with a coach for the first time, and I've had many over the years. But most of them, I mean, this being in a leadership role, most of the problems, the challenges, obstacles you've already heard of and dealt with before. Um, but I would say I'm really good at hovering over a situation kind of, and really getting a feel for what the challenge is, and then finding unique outside the box solutions that they may not have thought of, probably haven't, because they're in the midst of that challenge, and they're walking through it without being able to have a bird's eye view of it, which probably sounds funny coming from me, being blind. But for me, I look at it as I didn't come to this conclusion until a few years ago, but I've been solving simple problems that most people just took for granted all their life. Like, how do I put
Ooh.
toothpaste on a toothbrush without being able to see it when I was 3 years old or whatever, however old I was? How to tie my shoes without someone being able to say, watch me do it, and I'll show you how to do it. I've been able to, I've had to find creative ways to solve problems, whether it was when I got into sales, the enrollment software didn't work with my screen reading software. So I had to count the tabs on the application and tab through the application and count how many screens that I moved through to know which one I was on. And sometimes it would work and tell me what screen I was on. It was predictable in that it was half the time it'd work and I knew what half the application would work on. But I had to really learn how to overcome that. Same thing's true with navigating and mobility. How do I get from the office or from my home to my appointments without being able to drive? An outside sales world. So I was taking the bus until I could afford to take a cab or an Uber. Uber wasn't even a thing and when I started my sales career in Buffalo, New York. So where I was living and working. So finding creative ways to solve problems is something that a lot of people may deal with some, but for the most part, that starts when they go to school or perhaps even when they get into the workforce. For me, it started when I was a child, 2, 3, 4 years old. So you get used to finding other ways, alternative ways to solve problems and come up with creative solutions. That's something that just becomes part of your DNA. And for me, when I get on the phone with someone as a business coach or I'm on Zoom working with them, I'm always thinking outside the box in terms of, okay, here's the problem, here's the obstacle. We're over here. This is point A. Over here is point B. How do we get from A to B in as straight a line as possible? It's never going to be a straight line, but as straight as possible, quick as possible, with as little resistance. And so I think that's an asset that most people would say, hey, that was really hard growing up that way. But in reality, I believe God was really setting me up and putting me in a position and equipping me with the tools that I would need to be a good coach. And I think that's what separates me.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. It's interesting because I'm always like a big proponent of introverts in my company because I feel that introverts are thinking while other people are talking. So I'm always
Yep.
interested to hear what introverts have to say because I recognize the way their brains are working and the way their personality types are. So I'm a big proponent of making sure the introverts are heard. But I never really thought about someone, who, like you said, because of your situation, you've been a massive problem solver your whole life. You've been
Yep.
doing like you're wired for problem solving, and so I can see where that could put you at a major advantage when someone's trying to explains a problem to you, and it seems like it's in your DNA now to just quickly have a solution because you've been doing this your whole life.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about advantage because when I got into the sales arena originally, you can hear the whispers kind of, or you have people who will say nice things to your face, but when they walk away, they're saying to somebody else, how does he think he's going to be able to do this? He can't drive, he can't,
Yeah.
he can't see, he can't, and yet then a year, 2 years later, when I was the number one account closer, they're like, well, he has an unfair advantage. He has a dog that he gets to take everywhere with him. I'm like, how quickly things change, and the same people have a totally different story 2 years later. But I get it. I mean, I looked at it as a negative early on. And then later on, 2 years, 3 years later, I'm like, this is an unfair advantage that I have. And it's really not fair that I get that I these advantages. I think the same thing is true with coaching. And I think, as you said, in leadership, anybody who's in a leadership role can probably relate that they have something that separates them. And usually it's the ability to read and understand and really build relationships with people, like you just said, not just noticing the people who are loud and like me, and are going to tell you what they're thinking all the time. If you don't ask, we're going to raise our hand. But the person who's in the back, where it's like, I can tell that person's really processing this, thinking about it and listening. I want to go over there and ask them what they're thinking because my guess is they have some insight that nobody else in this room has. That's how you know someone's a good leader like yourself.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. I love that. I love it. So one of the things, I was thinking about too, you've had really good success in sales and leadership. You know, what are some like maybe some personal habits or mindset shifts that help you the most through, becoming successful in sales leadership?
I think number one is how I start the day. And it doesn't have to be a spiritual thing, but for me, getting alone in the morning, for me, it's in prayer. For others, it might be meditation, but just taking some time to really be grateful and starting the morning on a positive note. Most people get up, maybe grab a cup of coffee, which nothing wrong with that. I drink coffee, but turning on the news right away, that's probably not the first thing you want to put in your brain. And I used to do that years ago, but a long time ago. But I think that's a big part of it is how you start your day, and then some exercise for me. More recently, I've started hitting the cold plunge, which I hate cold, but I love the way I feel when I get out of it, and I love the way I feel when I do something hard and get through it and start the day on a positive note. And then I would say beyond that, some breath work. But beyond that, I would say starting the day with the hardest things first, and just not being afraid of the hardest thing, or should I say, even if you are afraid of it, doing it anyway, forcing yourself to do hard things. Because when you're willing to do that, everything else gets easier, especially if you do it first. If you don't put that call that you're dreading off until 3:30 because you want to get it out of the way at 8:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning, and you do, whether it goes well or doesn't go well, the rest of the day should be a lot easier. And you can have a far more positive mindset. So if you juice yourself up with some positivity, whether it be an audiobook you're listening to on the way to work or this podcast, um, or reading something positive, meditating on some gratitude, even if it's just 10 things you're grateful for first thing in the morning before you open your eyes. And then you go hit the first thing, the hardest thing that you have to tackle for the day, if you're able. Sometimes it's a 3 o'clock scheduled meeting. You can't do anything about that. But if you can hit it first thing and get that out of the way, and if that's a win first thing in the morning, man, now the day gets easier after that. I'd say other than that, in terms of habits or rituals, um, most of them for me, I'm a relationship first person. So my secret weapon, not really secret, but my my recipe to building a successful team in leadership was just having relationships with the people I work with. And that doesn't mean I needed to be friends with all of them. I wasn't, but I was with many. But just being fair. So even if we have a great relationship and somebody brand new comes on and there's a conflict, even though I've known you for 10 years and the other person for 10 minutes, just being fair. If people know you're going to be fair, they will typically not, they may get upset, but they'll forgive you really quickly, and they'll understand that what you did, why you did what you did, and they know that the next time when they're the one who's in a tough situation, that you're going to be fair with them too. That's how you, for me at least, that's how I feel like I've earned respect when I was in a leadership role, and just treating people like human beings. We live in a technology world where everything is AI and social media and robots, and there'll be more of that in the coming years. There's nothing wrong with that, but just understanding we live on a people planet, and for me, people come first, relationships come first, and there's a difference between having 5,000 Facebook or social media friends versus actual human interaction and building relationships with people, caring about people, really actually wanting to know about who they are, why they tick, their families, things like that. I mean, I have people who, when my son was born, I trusted multiple people on my sales team to watch my kid. Why? Because I had that good of a relationship with them. You're not going to have that with everybody, but at least try. At least try to to get to know people, because if they're not just a number and they know they're not just a number, and when their numbers are down in sales, you can come to them and say, hey, this is unlike you. You always do really well. I'm worried about you. Is everything okay? Can I, forget about sales for a minute. Are you okay? And when you do that, it's amazing how people open up and go, wow, he really cares about me. She really cares about me. They care about me as a human being, not just as a salesperson or as a member of, as an employee or a member of the team. When that happens, people start to go, I'm going to jump through hoops for this person. I'm going to go the extra mile. When I ask for more, that person's going to give me more. Why? Because they know that I actually care about them as a human being, not just, hey, this is somebody who can help me hit my quota. Nobody wants to be that.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, one of the leaders I look up to, and someone who created a great company, and that's Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A. he
Mm,
would always say, "We're not in the chicken business; we're in the people business,"
I
and
love
it's
that.
and it's remarkable because what you talk about seems like common sense to me, and but oftentimes we miss it as leaders. So we're, I people always ask me, is it the mission or is it the people? And I say both. Like we have to have people to accomplish the mission, right? And both are important. And I see many leaders will put the mission above people to the point where they feel like they're just a number, that nobody cares for them. And what ends up happening is those people then don't put in 110%. They're not, they're just, clocking in and clocking out and moving on with their lives. And I think, having a leader that has a relationship is a big part of great leadership. So, but I think it's missed on a lot of managers, unfortunately.
100%. Every time I walk into Chick-fil-A, and it's a one, it's probably the reason I go. I like the food, but I try not to eat a lot of fast food, but it's the place I'll go, especially now that I'm down south. Because I love that when I walk in and after I order my food and you say thank you. Now I say thank you anyway, but I actually pay attention to what they say afterward. Every one of them says the same thing, my pleasure. Now I know they've been trained to say that, but it doesn't change the fact that it makes me smile every time because they're putting people first. Everywhere else you go, you're like, thank you. They want to use real words. It's like, do you
Right.
want to be here or do you not? Like, if you don't want to be here, go do something else because you're getting paid fairly well to do this. I don't know what they get paid, but I can just tell you they may be forced smiles. I don't know, but they seem to enjoy what they're doing and they treat you like human beings. And that makes me want to buy more chicken.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think what he said, what he talks about too, what he talked about was the idea that every person has a story. And he was talking about employees and customers, and to make sure that you focus on them and their story. And I think it shows in their employees today. What's remarkable is it's repeated all over the country, and that they've been able to take a strategy like that and grow it, over such a large company. So it's very, I do study Chick-fil-A business model with my students a lot, and they probably get sick of me talking about Chick-fil-A, but I do think there's a lot of things that we can learn from leadership over the way they run their business, for sure.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. So, one thing I was thinking about, what your journey, we've talked about it in terms of problem solving and having to overcome challenges. How has that helped you when you're coaching other people through, like, maybe some of their limited beliefs or their hangups or their struggles? How does your story help them, overcome some of their challenges?
I think a big part of it is just being vulnerable with people and being open about things that I go through because a lot of times, and I'm sure you can relate to this, being in your business for 30 years, people think that you're good at everything. If they don't know you super well, they might think, hey, of course he's good at this. He's been doing this 30 years. Or in my case, you've been, coaching in some capacity for over 10 years. Uh, so they think that because you have a successful business by some standards, that they're you don't have problems, or because you have the life that you want or more of the life that you want, that you don't have challenges. And so I think a big part of it for me is just opening up and being vulnerable about the things that are still challenges for me because I'm human. Are my habits better than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Absolutely, but it's because I'm always working on them. Are they still a work in progress? Absolutely. And when you get vulnerable and open up to people, and that doesn't mean being crazy vulnerable, but just being willing to share with people that you're far from perfect, um, and God or the world is still working on you, and you're still working on yourself. I think that is something that makes people open to sharing more about themselves. So I ask a lot of questions. I do my best to listen and zip it because that's tough for me. I like to talk, so and I like to share stories and beliefs and all that because I feel like I can help. But at the same time, like being a good listener is something that I've really worked on, and I'm once again still a work in progress, but getting better at it. And engaging them and asking questions and really caring, but also, like I said, being vulnerable and sharing some of the things I've been through because I think it'll help. I think it'll help that they go that this person can make it through adversity that they've gone through. I certainly can't. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people who've been through far worse things than being blind and far bigger challenges than I've been through. And I won't pretend I can relate to all of them because in many cases, I can't. But they could probably teach me something about, having a different mindset. But I think realizing that if I can have a positive mindset, waking up and not being able to see the sunrise, but still being excited about it every morning, that at least now I know there's a sun here, that the cloud, I can feel the sunrise like where I was in Buffalo. Um, all my Buffalo people will send me nasty emails later about
Right,
that.
exactly.
But just if I can be excited about the start of the day with the challenges that I have, that they also can see opportunity out there, and that they can get over their challenges and obstacles they're dealing with. Because there's one thing that's guaranteed. People say death and taxes. I'll throw in adversity, because we're all going to, even if you decide to live in the wilderness somewhere, maybe you don't have to pay taxes, but you're going to deal with adversity no matter where you are on this green blue ball floating around the sun. It's just a guarantee. So you're either in the midst of adversity now, you're coming out of it, or you're going into it. So if it's summer right now in your life, winter will happen again. And understanding that when someone is in that it helps, I think, to know that the person that's coaching you or mentoring you has been through it too, and to be able to say, I've been through something just like that. This is what I did. This is how I got through it. Or I haven't been through something like this, but here's a scenario where I dealt with something similar, and here's how I got through it. And then here are some strategies that can help you, right? Here are some marketing strategies that help you bring in more clients. Here's some breathwork techniques that you can use, that when you go through a stressful moment like that you can get through it feeling better. Whatever it is, giving them some things they can apply and implement right now, or very soon, like by tomorrow morning, and also helping them understand that it's a mindset thing first. First, your mind has to get there. Everyone wants to be successful and then they'll have the right mindset. Doesn't work that way. You've got to have the right mindset first, which is the hardest part. You've got to be a millionaire, or someone who has, a six-figure income, or whatever, put money aside, who has the time, freedom, and the life that you want now in your head to be able to get there. And then you'll start seeing the steps that you have to take to get there. I can help them with the steps, but if the mindset isn't there, it's not going to matter. The mindset has to be there first, and then we can follow up with the activity that's going to drive that journey to the end goal.
I love that. I just was listening, just shaking my head, saying yes, yes, yes. I love it. It's fantastic. Patrick, what final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
I think that you have an audience, an amazing audience of mostly people in leadership position. This is something that all of them have probably heard, and something they all probably do on a regular basis. But it's just a reminder that I even needed over and over. And when I was in leadership, and even when I'm coaching leaders, or feel like I'm at times in a leadership position now, um, in business, is that people will do what you do, they won't do what you say. And I think we always have the cute saying out there that do as I say, not as I do, but that's not what children do, and it's not what adults do. I can tell you right now, my 3-year-old watches everything I do, which is a very scary thought because I'm not perfect. So he watches me fall, and I have to say, no, that's not, that's what daddy just did there is not good. Don't do that. I'm working on that and fixing that, buddy. So you need to not do that. But they watch, and the same thing is true of our team. If you're not willing to lead, and I don't want to lecture because I know everybody in your audience already knows this and is already doing this to some extent, but just a reminder that if you're not 100% focused on the mission, and they don't believe that you're 100% in, they're not going to be. And you've got to lead yourself first. And it's something that took me a little while to figure out that wasn't just a cliche. And that's something I had to do when I got into leadership. Because when you get into leadership, it's like, oh, I'm a manager now. No, you don't want to be a manager. Regardless of what your title is, it can say XYZ manager. At the end of the day, you're a leader. And if you're a leader, you want to be someone that other people want to follow. And that means somebody who's willing to do the hard things that most people don't want to do the right thing even when it's difficult. These are all things we've all heard before. Easy to say, hard to do. But when you do those things, when you do the right thing even when it's difficult, Um, when you do the hard work, even when no one's watching, and people see that you treat them fairly and that you're willing to lead from the front, that that's not just a slogan that you have, people will want to follow you. And when people, it's a whole lot easier to get people to do things because they want to follow you. I mean, I had a leader in my life who's still a very good friend of mine to this day, was a regional manager in the company I was with for years. And I just didn't want to let this guy down because he was willing to lead from the front and he always had my back and he showed me what it meant to be successful. And he believed in the blind guy from Buffalo, New York, when nobody else did. So when nobody else, including myself, thought I could make it, he told me over and over again that he believed in me, and I knew he meant it. I knew he meant it. And because of that, I'm like, I don't forget about me. I don't want to let this guy down. Like I can't fail because if I do, I'm gonna let Joe down. And that's the kind of leader I wanted to be. I wanted to be like him. I still tell him, I said, when I grow up, I want to be like you. Uh,
Mm.
even though after a decade of leadership. So that I think is who if you could focus on being that as much as possible, someone people want to follow rather than someone who wants to manage. Anybody can be a manager. Very few people can be a good, strong leader. And if you can be that person, you will never have problems. If you leave a position for whatever reason, it doesn't work out somewhere, you will always be able to find another leadership position somewhere else. Because if you're someone who people want to follow, the rest is history. Because there's very few people like that out there. And people just are magnetically drawn to them. I'm not the best at it by any means, but that is when I'm on my game and when I have had a lot of success as in a leadership role, the times that that's happened and gone well, it's because I was able to personify that. So always a work in progress, but that would be the biggest thing I would say.
I love it. Such powerful advice on so many different fronts. And so that's wisdom coming from someone who's been in the trenches and has learned how to do that. And that's Patrick, that's really good advice for all of our listeners. So
Thank you.
how can our listeners find out more about you and the work you do?
Yeah, so if they're looking to bring me in for, if anybody's looking to, look me up for speaking, either leadership speaking or overcoming adversity or sales, patrickengasser.com. I know you'll have that in the notes, Engasser, patrickengasser.com. If someone wants to book a strategy session and if they put in the notes um, that they're from John's podcast, uh, there won't be a strategy session fee for you because they're coming from your awesome audience. Because I appreciate you having me on. It's a privilege to be on. They can go to talkwithpatrick.com, just how it's spelled, just how it sounds, talkwithpatrick.com, and that'll take them right to my calendar. And just like I said, when John, my administrator, reaches out, just let her know that you're from this podcast. There's no fee, and I'd love to see how I might be able to help you and your team grow in a big way. So I appreciate the time on. It's been an honor, and keep up the great work, my friend. Thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, okay, listeners, we love free stuff on this show. We just got a free offer and we have links in the show notes for all of Patrick's resources, but hit him up on that offer because I think here's the deal. If you're a leader and just you're like an athlete and you need a coach and you need coaches to help you along the way. I have a leadership coach. I have a mentor. Patrick had one. I think the great leaders have people that help them out to see things that they can't necessarily see in themselves. So if you haven't found a good mentor or someone to coach you along the way, Patrick's available. You might want to reach out and talk to him. And you can tell that he's very passionate about leadership. And I didn't disagree with much that he said. So I was nodding my head a lot to what he was talking about towards the end, especially around what makes a great leader or a leader worth following, as he said. And I think I was right on board with that. So listeners, I want to encourage you to follow up on the links below and reach out to Patrick and get better, become a better leader, and Patrick will help you do that. So, Patrick, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your story and your experience in leadership.
It's an honor, John. Thanks for having me and look forward to talking to many of you. Talkwithpatrick.com. Let's go.
All right, thank you. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.